Good morning, Mavia. Australia 7 news longer than Sangamanика the day neighbor. Official today neighbor. Not on Giada, no?
And the Middle East is teetering on the brink of all-out war as the US and Israel trade escalating attacks with Iran. More than 500 targets in Iran have been robbed by US and Israeli forces just hours after nuclear negotiations broke down. Israeli officials have now told Reuters that the body of Iran's supreme leader has been found in the rubble.
Now, US President Donald Trump is calling on Iranians to use this moment to overthrow the regime.
Lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
Okay, for more, we're joined by Home Affairs Minister Tony.
Mima Bima Elumio, Mapilla Naiundo, Pio Naindala. Okay, Ero Camiado, Aku, Grega, Be Psycho, you Malay Surao, Uraja. Mino le Larom. Babiso number D. Sigo Piat. Dio Iranga Boncha Candalo, Dioga Bomcha Bene, Sopiata Wama, Sopiata Bulampia Dwavi. Iranye, Guze Yaga no love, Sidio, Dioga Unina, Gije to a Pinia, Dago America, Gene, by the Digon Taiwan attack global to a CEO result 10. During the sun, now the check and the sun and near side to them, the yuan yam me pure, longer than the nigga joke pure gede. Saudi got that time to ame, ningaze be water, that time to ame, US dollar never yaume should have that time to go. The gale of Saudi gaba follow low US fucked up pibit. 2% ကြာပြီသူတိုင်းပြီးကြာပြီသူမလုံးလို့မရဘူးလုံးကိုလုံးอ่ะပထမ deal လုပ်နေတယ်ဆိုတော့ nuclear deal ထက် that's petrodollar deal နော် petrodollar deal ကျုပ်ကတော့ဒါပဲမြင်တယ် petrodollar ကသူ့ရဲ့ပတ်စံဒေါ်လာက backed by petrol နော်ဆိုတော့ petrol အကုန်ဂွန်သွားရင်သူ fucked up ဖြစ်ပြီ now brick currency ဆိုပေါ်လာရင်သူသိပြီအဲ့တော့ brick currency ကိုသူလုံးဝဖြတ်ကိုဖြတ်ကျုပ်ပြောထားပြီးပြီရင်ကတည်းဒါသူတိုင်းပြည်အတွက်သူလှုပ်တာအယမ်းမှန်တယ်သူများတွေအတွက်တော့မှားချင်မှာပဲဒါသူလှုပ်ကိုလှုပ်ရမယ်မလှုပ်ရင်သူတိုင်းပြည်ကြဆင်းတရုတ်ကဒီနီးနဲ့တတ်နေတာဆိုတော့သူကလုံးဝပြန်တာဟိုစီပြတ်ကြမ်းပဲပြည့်ရှင်သူထိုင်ဝမ်သူဘလို့လို့တိုက်ညံကြီးရှင်နေ geopolitics ညံကြီးရှင်နေပြောစမ်းမအောင်စစ်ပွဲတပွဲကဘလောက်ကြာမလဲမသိဘူးသူကိုယ်တိုင်နဲ့အခုဒီမိတ်ကုန်းမှာတွားကြည့်လို့ရတယ်ခင်ဗျာသူမနေ့ကပြောတာ Fox News မှာတွားကြည့်လိုက် Fools သူပြောတာ detail ရှိတယ်သူဘလောက်ကြာမလဲဆိုသူလည်းမသိဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ we have to ငါတို့လုပ်ကိုလုပ်ရမယ်ဟုတ်တယ်မှန်တယ်လုပ်ကိုလုပ်ရထိုနည်း၎င်းမယ်တိုင်ဝမ်ကို China ကတိုက်မယ်ဆိုရင်တိုက်ပွဲဘလောက်ကြာမလဲဘယ်သူမှမသိအဲ့အတွက်အမြဲစီပို့ပေးနိုင်တဲ့ဟာလို့လေနံပါတ်2 80% လောက် Venezuela ရဲ့စီကိုလည်းသူတို့ကယူနေတာနော် 80% လောက် Venezuela ရဲ့စီကိုယူနေတာကြောက် Venezuela ကိုသူလုပ်ပြီးသွားပြီကြောက် Venezuela ကလည်းတရုတ်ပတ်စံနဲ့ရောင်းနေတာသူဓာတ်တွေအကုန်လိုက်ပိတ်ရခုပိတ်ပြီပါဒီကောင်ပိတ်ကိုပိတ်မယ်ကျွန်တော်သိတယ်မပိတ်ရင်ဒီ Arab တခွင်သူ lose ဖြစ်ပြီသူပတ်စံနဲ့တောင်းပြီသူလုံးဝကန်သွားပြီစစ်ပွဲမရှိဘဲနဲ့သူကြဆုံးသွားမှာတရုတ်က နော်အခုတရုတ်စီစေးတွေတရုတ်ပြည်မှာရေးတယ်ကန်ဝိုင်းတက်ဝိုင်းဒီအပြင်လက်ရှိတရုတ်ပြည်တွင်းမှာနေသူတို့ PLA ကဇီနဲ့ပြဿနာကြီးကျယ်တက်နေတယ်ခင်ဗျားတို့သွားကြည့်လို့ရတယ် line ပေါ်မှာသူစစ်တပ်နဲ့သူပြဿနာတက်နေတာသူရဲ့လုပ်ရက်တွေကအမှားလို့အဲ့တော့မြန်မာပြည်မအားလာလေရင်စီပေးရရဒီကောင်လေးက ghost ship လေးနဲ့တရုတ်ပြည်ကိုဒီ Iran စီတွေတည်နေတာအမေရိကမသိဘူးထင်တယ်စောက်ချင်မဟုတ်ဘူးသူတို့တွေကကြည်နေတာဘာလို့ ghost ship လို့ပြောရဲဆိုတော့ဒီကနေ Iran ကနေပြီးတော့မလေးရှားသူကမလေးရှားပင်လယ်ထဲမှာ ship to ship transfer နဲ့သွား ghost ship လို့ခေါ်တယ်အဲ့တဲ့တင်ကျောင်းနာမှာတွေ့တယ်ပေးမယ်အဲ့တော့ geopolitician ညံကြီးရှင်ကိုစီဝါဘယ်နဲ့နေစားခမရပြောသွားတာလုံးဝမတိုက်နိုင်ဘူးတဲ့တိုက်ရင်ခမရထိုင်ဝမ်ကိုဟိုးစားဖြစ်မှာတရုတ်ကဘေးဥစားဖြစ်မှာညာဥစားဖြစ်မှာလုံးကြည့်လိုက်လေခမရ PLA ကမလုပ်ဘူးအဲ့ဒါလက်ရှိပြဿနာတက်နေတာခမရကျုပ်ကနှစ်ဖက်လုံးကိုတည်င်းကိုကြည်နေတာနောက်ဆိုခမရ line ပေါ်မှာပြောရင်ခမရတယောက်တည်းပညာတတ်မဟုတ်ဘူးခမရလောက်ပညာတတ်တဲ့လူခမရတဲ့ပညာတတ်တဲ့လူလည်းကြည်နေမှာအဲ့တော့ခမရစကားပြောနေလေးကိုစောက်ရန်ဘူဝင်မမြင့်နေနဲ့ငါတီးငါတက်ငါဘောမှာပဲဆိုပြီးတော့โอเคနော်ဒါပဲပြောချင်ပါတယ်ဘယ်လို ship to ship transfer လုပ်တယ်ဆိုတာမင်းတို့သိအောင်ပြလိုက်
The oil tankers out of range of law enforcement.
Many of these ships gathered here in the South China Sea east of the Malaysian peninsula are part of what's known as the Dark Fleet, a network of aging vessels that often operate without insurance.
မင်းတို့ကထင်နေတာတရုတ်ကထင်နေတာတိတ်လင်လာပြီထင်နေတာငါခုနပြောခဲ့တယ်မလေးရှားကနေ ghost ship နဲ့ဘယ်လို transfer လုပ်တယ်ဆိုတာအခုဒီမှာကြည့်ငါပြန်တသိတယ်
and hide their location to move sanctioned oil. Extensive research, data analysis, and eyewitness accounts lay bare the workings of an Asian maritime hub that helps hundreds of millions of barrels of illicit oil move east despite the risks.
It was about trying to establish how big this phenomenon is, how big this problem is, and therefore how big the risks are.
In 2023, a major accident occurred involving a Dark Fleet tanker.
The Pablo was a tanker that was coming back from China. When we later looked at the satellite images of the Pablo, we could see that the deck was basically burned through. 3 of the crew were lost, so it's a reminder that there is a very real human cost here.
The Pablo had been operating for 25 years, far longer than the average life of a legitimate tanker. It had no known insurer, meaning it lay stranded in the ocean for many months until Malaysia ultimately bore much of the recovery costs.
Old ships are no longer scrapped at the rates that they used to be, and they're in fact now used in the dark fleet by companies and organizations that are willing to break the rules.
In the past, the international group was insuring almost 95+% of all the ships in the world. Now, they're insuring about 80-85%, and that's dangerous. The shadow fleet consists of very old ships. There are plenty of accidents. Shipping is a business full of risk. That's why you have insurance.
The Pablo was just one of many dark fleet vessels that transit through the waters east of Malaysia, some of the busiest on Earth.
What we see here in Singapore, is highly regulated. Hundreds of ships are passing here on a daily basis, up to 70,000 per year. But just nearby here, there are other places that ships go where it's less well regulated.
We became aware of this flotilla in the end of 2023. It was the size and the scale of the flotilla that kind of caught our attention.
Importantly, it's outside territorial waters and in an area where countries have much more limited enforcement rights.
Positioned midway between the oil exporters in the Persian Gulf and oil consumers like China, it's an ideal spot for ships from east and west to converge. Typically, calm waters make transfers easier.
We've been following sanctioned oil for quite a long time, and tracking that, we found that not only had that cluster grown, but also the number of ship-to-ship transfers of oil done at sea, that number had increased steadily.
The trade in oil subject to US sanctions has surged since 2022, fueled by curbs on Russian exports, as well as restrictions reimposed on Iranian crude in 2018.
A day before I got to office, everybody was saying Iran would be taking over the Middle East. It was just a question of when. Now they're just looking to survive.
Not all the oil in this cluster and moving around this area is Iranian, but the vast majority is.
Because of US sanctions on Iran, Iran really needs to sell its oil and really needs the revenue that comes from these sales.
Iran sells 90+% of its oil to China, and in particular to private refiners in China. This is a multi-billion-dollar trade.
In order to stay competitive, the Chinese refiners, of course, would like to procure the cheapest crude they can find, and oftentimes the cheapest crude will be the ones that are restricted.
It is a known truth in the maritime circles, in shipping circles, that this cluster exists. But I think what we were trying to do was really to put some scale around it. How big is it? How big are these risks? How much oil is shifting through?
Mino tira bo, mino nama toani le, si uniform ne toani le lu de tiyaw ma mshi yo yo be twi de no, yo yo lu ponza ne twa pyo information de mino ko yu la, mino ko ne ma ala de, ba le lo ni de so la le ti time me ngaro yu la de na le.
Where we saw a ship-to-ship transfer taking place yesterday on the satellite. Just to be clear, a ship-to-ship transfer is not necessarily illegal. However, if it is done as it is here in outer waters,
Aku kika 4 round lwe.
certainly some questions. We really like to
I saw track lo wa da ayan lwe de tembo le.
emblematic of the dark fleet.
Na le.
We should have maybe 3-4 vessels that are
AIS ဆိုတာရှိတယ်အဲ AIS ဆိုတာတော့ဖြုတ်လို့မရအောင်အဲ AIS ကနေပြီးလိုက်ရတာအရင်လို့ဒါတော့သိချင်လို့ချင်း geopolitician ကြီးဇီဝမေးကြည့်ပါ
Looking at AIS data mainly, and then we realized that AIS is kind of not good enough because
ကြားရနော် AIS
they don't want to be scrutinized, they don't want to be seen. They switch off their AIS.
yeah they do lo switch off လုပ်လို့ရတယ်ဒါတင်မောမှာရှိတယ် AIS ဆို switch off လုပ်လို့ရတယ်
Satellite data.
exactly
What the
ဒါပေမဲ့သူတို့မသိတာငါတို့
really examine the cluster.
ship position GPS ဆက်ယူอ่ะအဲ့ရနဲ့ satellite ကနေပြန်လိုက်လို့ရတယ်ဒါကိုမင်းတို့ကောင်လည်းမသိဘူး
These are very distinctive shapes, extremely visible.
မင်းတို့ကောင်လည်းလွယ်တယ်ထင်တယ်လို့
Using
လား
almost 5 years of satellite imagery, Bloomberg News built an algorithm to detect all the instances where vessels adopted the distinctive ship-to-ship position.
We've been able to show that that trade has been consistently increasing, which is something that I think the industry intuitively knew but couldn't really prove.
Of all the ships passing through the area in 2020, 5% were involved in ship-to-ship transfer. Between January and October 2024, this has risen to 10.3%. The data suggests some 350 million barrels of oil changed hands here in the first 9 months of 2024. That adds up to more than $20 billion.
Okay, so if you were coming up, are they tankers?
Of the three, the one on the left is a tanker, I think. Yeah.
There's just so much traffic, you forget how much actually goes through these waters.
Oh, where? Which one? Oh, there.
Wow, found one. Yeah. We found 2 dog fleet vessels doing a ship-to-ship transfer, 2 supertankers. It's Win-Win and Titan, so 2 vessels that are known to us and on our list. When we looked at the map earlier this morning, these vessels were not here. So it's likely that they have their AIS transponders off, which again is fairly typical for dark fleet vessels.
AIS switch off
The
လုပ်ရင်
Titan and the Win-Win display every characteristic of the dark
guilty of
fleet.
crime တက်လာ
The
maritime
Titan is known to have
သူတို့
transported
အဲ့ company
oil,
အကြီးကျယ်
while
soft
the
development
Win-Win's
တက်
sporadic signaling draws an impossibly linear journey from China to the South China Sea.
It's really interesting as we come around the side, you can actually see the cables connecting them both and the pipes that will transfer the crude over, and you can see that right through the middle of the vessels. See, there's some protection.
ငါတို့ operation လုပ်ရင်အဲ့လို transfer ယူရတယ်ငါတို့စီးတွေကို
In the ship-to-ship
တင်မောသွားနေ
transfer,
တော့
a number
transfer
of
ယူရ
safety
တာ
precautions are in
ငါတို့က
place
ရက်လို့မရ
to
ဘူး
prevent
တင်မော
accidents.
You're supposed to have somebody on the vessel who's
မင်း
in charge of safety.
ဇီဝမင်းငါ level ရောက်ဖို့အများကြီးလေ့ကျင့်လိုက်အောင်ဇီဝ ငါ level ရောက်ဖို့မင်းကငါ့ကိုကလေးချီကောင်းဟုတ်လားမင်းငါ level ရောက်အရင်ကျင့်လိုက်အောင်နော်အင်ဂျီတစ်တစ်ကလေးတွေဝတ်ပြပြီး line ပေါ်တက်ရုံနဲ့မင်းကိုမင်းဟုတ်လာပြီမထင်နေနဲ့
I also see that someone is looking out and watching us from that deck up there.
Might be time to move on.
Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, good to go. Full speed ahead. We know that if there is a leak from a vessel like this, there's 2 million barrels of oil. That's just a huge amount. And if you compare that to the very small spill that happened in Singapore earlier this year, that was 400 tons. I mean, that's just an absolute tiny fraction of what these vessels carry. As far as we know, almost nothing is being done to shut the flotilla down.
There's only so much that the Malaysian authorities, in particular the Coast Guard, can do with the resources they have. They have many other maritime security challenges: illicit smuggling, people smuggling, illegal fishing. This seemingly doesn't rank at the top of the list.
There is a big debate about how effective sanctions are and what sanctions effectiveness looks like.
In an ideal world, if sanctions were to be fully enforced, it would be very difficult for Iran to bring its oil to the market, but in reality, it is quite difficult to trace.
But there are incentives not to entirely cut off Iran's oil supply.
It is in nobody's interest to completely stop or curb the flow of Iranian, Venezuelan, and also Russian crude to the market, because these are very, very big and important producers of oil. So it is in nobody's interest to actually completely cut off this flow and send prices skyrocketing.
There are very few incentives for China to actively enforce US sanctions. China's economy is still struggling, the refineries' margins are poor, they have every incentive to keep buying cheaper Iranian crude.
It's arguable that the increased use of sanctions by the United States has actually created a new market that those companies and organizations that are willing to break and avoid the sanctions are able to exploit the waters of this region to conduct their business.
I don't think that sanctions are ineffective. I I do think that they take a very long time to be effective and they take a lot of work.
Enforcement depends on cooperation with countries, sharing of information, working together to ensure the overall safety of global trade and the shipping lanes, and especially the environment, and the seafarers themselves.
If there is an oil spill, then fully insured ships, we are also effectively uninsured. And that is a big risk. That makes the non-shadow fleet very scared and skeptical, and rightly so.
My fellow Americans, we will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. The United States no longer makes empty threats.
Donald Trump, having reimposed sanctions on Iran during his first term, has said he will renew his maximum pressure campaign to starve the country of the oil revenue it depends on. This flotilla of aging tankers shows that's easier said than done.
When you have too many sanctions but not enough enforcement, the illicit actors will exploit that, they know that, and they will carry on with the activities, and the illicit activities will grow, and therefore the risks will grow.
Okay နော်အဲ့တော့ခင်ဗျားတို့ clear ဖြစ်ပြီလားဘာကြောင့် US က attack လုပ်မယ်တော့လုပ်ကိုလုပ်ရမယ်ဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်မင်းတို့တခြားလူတော့မသိအခုလေးတင်တွေ့လိုက်တာဒါတော့မှငါစောက်တင်ကိုခြားထားတာတွေ့လို့ငါအဲ့ဟာလေးတပုတ်ပဲနားထောင်လိုက်တာမှ तू ကအဲ့တပုတ်ရဲ့နောက်ကွယ်မှာ तू ပြောထားတယ်အီရန်နဲ့အမေရိကန်နဲ့ဘာတွေဖြစ်နေဆိုတော့နားထောင်တာငါ review လုပ်ထားတာကျန်တာတွေငါနားမထောင်အောင်ဒီနားလည်းမထောင်ပါဘူးဒီလို level နဲ့ကောင်ပြောတဲ့စကားတွေ okay အဲ့တော့မင်းငါ level ဖြစ်အောင်အရင်လေ့ကျင့်လိုက်အောင်နားလေလားနော်ငါရဲ့အတွေ့အကြုံငါရဲ့ experience level ဖြစ်အောင်မင်းလေ့ကျင့်အောင်အရင်လေ့လာအောင်နားလေလားမင်းတို့ငါကမြန်မာပြည်ကနေဒီတိုင်းပြည်ကိုပဲရောက်ဖူးတဲ့ကောင်မဟုတ်နားလေလားမင်း you name it I've been there all over places okay မင်းပြောနိုင်ငံငါကိုရပြီးပြီငါ operate ငါတို့ဘာလဲဆိုတာမင်းကိုကြွားစရာမလိုလိုင်းပေါ်နေတဲ့ငါကြွားစရာမလိုနားလေလားငါရဲ့ကိုကမအေးလို့မအားလား dictator နဲ့ crony တွေရှားဆုံးမှုပဲဒါပဲ